Hello, and welcome to another weekly episode of the Co-Living Code Show. I am your host, Christine McDaniel. I am the founder of Kndrd, which is the software platform for the co-living industry. So I eat, sleep, and breathe everything co-living, and it's been so much fun doing the show every week. It's been over a year now, where I bring on experts from around the world to talk about their concepts, their journey into co-living. And today I actually have Ed Thomas on, who is the head of customer experience at the Collective, where he is responsible for designing and delivering a world-class customer experience to all members from the moment they move into to the moment they leave and beyond. Working with different teams throughout the company, Ed's ultimate goal is to create a vibrant experience culture where the Collective members become evangelists for the brand. Ed's interest in different ways people might live in the future stems from his 3 years co-living experience whilst working in San Francisco. And while there, he ran sales and community for a Y Combinator-backed co-living startup. And previous to that, he worked at a digital agency working on projects for consumer tech clients, including Facebook and Amazon. And I know we had the founder of the Collective, Reza Merchant, on earlier this year. So it's fun to bring on another team member because they're in the midst of a big expansion. They just crossed over to the US into New York. So enjoy this week's episode. We also talk about, just briefly, about Burning Man because Ed has actually been for 5 years in a row. We tried to meet while we were out there, but there was 70,000 people and no cell phones. So we didn't cross paths. But the 10 principles of Burning Man really cross over a lot to co-living. And for those that don't know them, I'll just read through them really quick. Radical inclusion, gifting, decommodification, radical self-reliance, radical self-expression, communal effort, civic responsibility, leaving no trace, participation, and immediacy. And again, there are some co-living concepts already around the world that are founded on these principles. Definitely dive into them. You can look them up online and, understand each one in detail. But I think they're personally, and especially me, experiencing it for the first time this year, there are so many crossovers between that community that only appears 1 week out of the entire year in the middle of the desert with 70,000 people, and then it disappears without a trace, to how the principles of co-living, just those base fundamentals of building community and helping each other and just being humane and the opposite of loneliness, the opposite of isolation. So enjoy this episode with Ed Thomas of The Collective. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another weekly episode of the Co-Living Code Show, where we bring on experts from around the world to talk about their passion for co-living and community, which is what we're going to talk to with Ed Thomas today. He is with the Collective, based out of UK, but now they're branching over to New York, crossing over the pond. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. But mainly wanted to talk about Burning Man with him. We didn't meet out there. We were trying to, but I know there's tons and tons of crossover on what you guys have built with the Collective when it comes to community. We've obviously had Rez on this show earlier this year, and we talked a little bit about it. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on, Ed.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start there. Like, how long have you been with the Collective, and what's your role there?
Sure. I've been at the Collective for nearly 4 years. So I came on board from San Francisco, where I was living previously, and was working at a co-living startup out there, and joined the Collective just ahead of the launch of Old Oak in May 2016. So I was brought on as kind of the first community hire.
Nice. And then was that your main role, was to kind of help build the community from the ground up and facilitate that?
Yeah, exactly. I'd had an actual kind of community oriented role in San Francisco. I had actual experience, and when I came back to London, the Collective was very small. It was about 15 people, and the team had a vision for what they wanted, but they hadn't had that real life experience of putting in the structures that allow community to thrive. So I came on board as the person to lead that. So spent the first kind of 2 years on site, really testing every single day and learning every single day about what worked and what didn't work, bringing my experience from the States to London, but also, it was a completely new challenge just in terms of the sheer scale of the building. I'd only ever worked out of co-living spaces that were max 75 units. So this was 550. So it was a big step up and required a lot of new thinking.
And then you guys, so that was back when you started, there were 15 team members. Now, how many are there total?
I think they're about 300 now.
Oh my
So
gosh, that's
we've
amazing.
grown an enormous amount, and it's incredibly exciting. I guess for me personally, it's just exciting to see that this as a sector has gone from being complete outcast, where people just didn't think this would ever work. And I remember speaking to people when I started saying, I'm joining this company, you really should check it out. People who worked in the property industry their whole lives, who were big names in that world, and they just dismissed it immediately. And I really vividly remember those conversations. So for me to now, be on a podcast, to be speaking at events, etc., where co-living is really regarded as an established mainstream asset class, it's incredibly exciting. So a lot has happened in those 4 years.
It sounds like it. No, for sure. And I can second that for sure. Especially in 2019, it seems like we've hit that tipping point, especially this year. It's kind of became mainstream, which is super exciting to see. And so the one in San Francisco, they're not around anymore, right?
No, it was a small operation, and in many respects it was well ahead of the curve. The guys got into Y Combinator actually, but they subsequently sort of pivoted the business to become more focused on the development side and moved away from the operations side. Their background was technology really, and they were really interested in how they could use technology to improve the development process. So that's what they focused on. So that company is now, I think it still exists, but they're not scaling it. And I'd also done some work with Campus as well, which was a startup, co-living startup that went under, as I'm sure you probably know. So it was a great time to be alive in San Francisco when you're just starting to see the disruption in the housing market take place. And I count myself very fortunate to have been there at that time.
And then now, so the first couple of years you were with the community, with the one role. What's your role currently within the collective?
So I head up our customer experience team, which, if the operations team is really involved in the day-to-day managing of our sites, the customer experience team is supporting them with continuous improvement, but also looking at longer time horizons and thinking about how we innovate our offering for new types of customers, new types of buildings, et cetera. And then we work hand in hand with teams across the business to kind of implement this new experience on site. So it's a really, really exciting role. I guess we're trying to champion the customer in the conversation, or the member in the conversation whenever we're making big business decisions. But ultimately what we want to do is really bring that kind of continuously evolving experience, continuously improving experience, like any great SaaS product or service, like continuously improve the on-site experience. And so that's kind of our remit.
Love that. And so what are some tips or tricks, words of advice for those that are trying to create real community within their co-living concept, whether it's small or big?
Yeah, I think there's lots of principles that can be applied to any co-living space, whatever the size. I've seen things work across all scales. I think for me, one of the pieces of advice I always share is the importance of moving away from curation and towards facilitation. I think if I imagine what a dream ideal end state looks like for us, like what success looks like for me, it's actually an operation where the collective is almost entirely removed from the picture. And instead we've put the structures, whether those are physical structures or intangible structures, in place to allow the community to flourish and thrive. But our role kind of stops there, and it's really about moving away from this kind of top-down curated experience, and instead focusing as much of our effort as possible in the kind of bottom-up experience, and being prepared to ride the lows with the highs with that approach. Of course, there are challenges with it as well.
Interesting. No, and I've heard just talking to so many different operators and people in the space. I do keep hearing, whether you curate it, whether you facilitate it, whether you don't do anything at all and let it just happen. When it comes to
Mm.
people building community, I've just heard so many different ways. So I guess maybe building some parallels against. So Burning Man, you've been to how many times you said?
I've been 5 times now.
5 times in a row total, including this
Yeah.
past one.
Yeah.
So what are some principles there? Obviously, when I did the intro to this interview, I read all their core principles. And so what are some parallels that you guys feel like you guys have, against that, or what do you see when you're out there?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it mirrors that point I just made, which is around how it is the community itself that create the experience. Burning Man itself doesn't do much. The organization itself doesn't do much in terms of kind of putting the experience on. It really puts the structures in place that enable the community or the attendees to put the experience on for others. And that, as I said, is the tangible things. It's the network of streets. It's the power grid. It's the airport. It's the buses. It's the medical tents. But it's also the intangible. It's the kind of the principles. It's the kind of the key messages, the communications, the kind of newsletters and things that they create to keep the community talking before, during, and after the event. And it's really the people that attend. They're the ones that make it so special. And I think that for me is a real source of inspiration, because I've seen it succeed in a temporary city of 75,000 people, 5 years in a row now.
Nice. And so with the collective, and so you guys, your messaging, like it's very, I think you're exactly right. I think that's what helps draw a certain type of person that's open to co-living, open to meeting new people.
Mm.
And so that's what, and you guys are great at that. And I love, love, love watching you guys do that. So is there any other things that you think, like, what is your guys' main demographic again, roughly?
So we've actually toyed a lot with this and realized that we don't actually have a demographic that moves in our building, a singular demographic. We're more interested in thinking about it in terms of psychographics, and we attract a type of someone who will score very highly on kind of openness to new experiences. So people who like to travel, people who like meeting new people, try new things for the first time. And when we look at all the types of people that live in our building, that is what is consistent across everyone. There isn't really a correlation with age. I think we have the average age is probably about 32. But, there is a huge spread in terms of profession, age, nationality, backgrounds. It's all very, very mixed. So we really think about it in terms of psychographics and that openness, the big five. If you know the big five personality test, the openness is people over index all the time.
Oh, so you guys have them do a personality test when they apply to live there?
Yeah, exactly. So we want to understand the people who are moving in order to be able to personalize an experience to them. It also helps us understand, what are the types of people who are getting the most out of the experience, so that we can then, refine our communications and marketing and the experience that takes place.
Nice. And then you guys just opened Canary Wharf this summer. So how did that go?
Yeah, we just opened Canary Wharf officially about 2 weeks ago. Actually, we soft launched in the summer. It's been an amazing project. It's a massive step up from Old Oak, and it's great to see all the learnings from operating Old Oak for 3 years incorporated into Canary Wharf. It's leasing up incredibly quickly, which is exciting. I think we're well ahead of where we needed to be. And it's an exciting evolution of the proposition too, where we're opening up the experience to people who can stay for one night. So you can be in Canary Wharf anywhere from 1 night to 365 nights. And that for us is a really exciting new chapter for the business, because one thing we felt really strongly was that why should people just be able to have this experience in Old Oak, where the minimum stay was 3 months? Why can't that be open to anyone? And I think if you think about some of the people who move around and stay in cities temporarily, you could argue that they are some of the most lonely, isolated people. And what we're all about is bringing people together and having co-living as an antidote to that social isolation. And what better way to do it than in a co-living space in Canary Wharf?
I love that. So how many units total is Canary?
So Canary Wharf is 705 units.
Ooh.
So big one.
Even bigger, even bigger. And what do you think is the percentage breakdown of like your hotel nightly, the guests that stay under maybe a week versus long term?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact percentage, but it's over half is what we call long stay. Maybe around 40% is short stay. We also have kind of extended stay in the middle as well, that makes up that short stay. So anywhere between 1 month and 3 months.
And I'm glad you brought up the loneliness, especially, in London. I mean, you guys have a minister of loneliness there, right? Over there in the UK?
Rather depressingly, we do.
No, but I mean, you guys, it's a positive step in the right direction, right? I think more countries need that because they're still suffering, just as bad. So do you guys have any, that's obviously amazing that people move, they can move to London. They might not know anybody. They might be moving there for a job. Do you have any stories of any guests or residents or members that came from a different country, didn't know anybody, moved in, now they're active in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that every person that's moved in has had that experience, because the whole premise of the place is, it's a network, a friendship group straight away. And I mean, all the time we hear about people who've moved to London, not known anyone, not known the city, and moved into one of our spaces and have instantly made friends. I mean, some of the greatest success stories range from people getting married and having babies through to people starting some like businesses, which we've seen quite a few times, some of which have gone on to be extremely successful, worth hundreds of millions of pounds, which was started by teams that met in the building. And then we ultimately also use their products and services now, which is quite funny, through to stories just around people who were, living a more isolated existence to living in community. And I think one of my favorite stories is just a guy who had chronic health issues with a kidney, I believe, and he was really unhappy, and then moved into Old Oak and found that just the simple act of being known and being seen and being recognized by the team each day when he walked in through the door had a huge impact on his health. And he went as far as crediting Old Oak with saving his life. And so, we are, having a really positive impact on people's lives, and it makes all our jobs so exciting. It's really worthwhile.
I love hearing that because, I know a lot of people have heard the stat, loneliness actually kills more than cigarette smoking. But just recently, somebody said, actually, it kills more than cigarette smoking and drinking combined, if you really truly measure it. And I couldn't believe that. So it's just exciting to see that you guys are putting that at forefront on how do you guys, help with that issue of loneliness and isolation, and by building community, and not just by, and again, I know a lot of co-living concepts are just kind of throwing those buzzwords out, community, but they don't really, they're not sure about how to create it. So I think you guys are taking an active role and love seeing that. So in the future, do you guys just see that expanding, in the future on how you guys are tackling that? I know you guys are jumped over to the pond recently to New York. So Paper Factory, is it soft opening right now for that?
It is. It's just launched actually, at the end of last week. So so that's a really exciting new step for us, and a flag on the map in the US. And to the point that I just made, I think at the end of the day, we all feel this really strongly in the collective, but it's the fact that we're social creatures, and in cities and in this era where 96% of millennials own smartphones, we're losing the true human connection that is what gives us life in many ways. And the problems we're trying to solve are not isolated to just London. London is an incredibly anonymous city in that regard. It's giant, and people don't speak to each other. All you need to do is travel on the tube, and it's just like, it's crazy that people don't talk to one another. And it's the same in New York, and it's the same in other major cities. And actually, I think it's broader than just cities. It's in towns and villages everywhere. And so I think we're on a mission to, connect people. It's not rocket science really what we're trying to do. What we're using at the moment is how we live, but in the future, there's no reason why we won't explore other ways that we can bring people together and just make those connections easier. And I think, I do honestly believe we'll look back in 10, 20 years and say that the last 100 years was the aberration from the norm. It was where this individualistic society, why on earth did we live like that? Because we've not lived like that for thousands of years before. And I think in the future, we'll be living much more closely together. So it's exciting. It's exciting to be at the front of that.
That's super exciting. No, you're exactly right. And I see the same happening, and I love watching that kind of unfold. So you guys are opening, Chicago is coming up next, right? Is that the next one on the map?
Yes. Yeah, that is Chicago and Harrow in London are happening at roughly the same time. So kind of mid 2021.
Great. And then any other cities you guys are thinking about, talking about, looking at that you're allowed to say?
So we're looking, so we have a site in Miami, and we're looking at others in New York, Boston, Chicago, and then if we're looking to the east of the UK into Europe as well, mainly focused on Germany, so the major cities in Germany, and also have a site in Dublin as well. So we're really excited to be entering into these markets, but bringing what we feel really strongly is a great addition to what should be a broad housing mix in the fabric of these cities, and providing these hubs for neighborhoods to meet in. And and I think from a member perspective, it's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks since Canary Wharf has really been up and running, and we're already seeing kind of this cross-pollination between buildings happening organically. We're not doing anything other than observing, but seeing how members are saying, hey, can we do some events with Canary Wharf who live in Old Oak? Or hey, can we what can we do to connect the buildings? And I think that's where it starts getting incredibly exciting when we start tapping into kind of the network effect.
And what's the distance, maybe drive time, between the two buildings?
So we have chosen to build on the two far outer edges of London, which means that it can vary in time. If you're on a good day, it's probably about an hour. Public transport is really good in London, so it would take you about 50 minutes to an hour. But us Londoners are waiting for Crossrail, which is this new massive train line that's supposed to be running from east to west, which will cut the travel time down to 15 minutes or something. But it seems to be delayed all the time. Each week, another year is added to the delay, at another £10 billion. So,
oh no,
I'm not sure whether it actually will ever happen.
It sounds, well, here in California, Elon's creating tunnels, and so
I
think
exactly.
it's this. We're waiting.
You guys are mad for it as well.
We'll see which one happens first, right? Yeah, we're waiting patiently. Also, you know how bad the traffic is in LA.
Yeah, it's great.
Perfect. So, and then how many events do you guys have, and what kind of events do you guys have?
So yeah, we have about, on average, I'd say between 2 and 3 a night, which makes for a really vibrant place to live. There's a whole bunch of stuff ranging from talks and workshops and classes that we put on. Is a big part of our messages around growth and personal development. But actually, back to the point earlier around empowering members to drive the experience, we have more than over half the events that take place each month are actually member led. So they may be one-offs, or clubs. And then we have kind of different leaders within each community who kind of has a responsibility to drive events as well. So, those might be, we do more often than not events in the local community. So canal cleanups, various volunteering opportunities. There's like a kind of running clubs that tie in with tasks that need to be done in kind of parks and schools and churches. So, there's a whole bunch of kind of social impact stuff we do through our events, a whole bunch of stuff around personal development, and then of course, having fun. If you have 550 or 700 people in one building, you can throw one hell of a house party.
You're right. Good point. And some of your events and, some of that sounds very similar to the Summit. I don't know if you've heard of the Summit series here in the States. Actually, I saw it was in Los Angeles this past week in the annual one. And I saw Reza there. I said, hi.
Oh, cool.
So, and that's such a great, they do such a good job, they've been around for 10 or 11 years at just throwing these events of just amazing, just everything you listed just now, how community-based, personal development, just kind of, curating this amazing conference once a year in Los Angeles. So yeah, I think content's key, and just like-minded people and, sharing ideas, learning from each other. So I think it's a great baseline. Yeah, that's a great place to do that and have that facility. So Ed, my last question, thank you so much again for coming on this week. It's always exciting. I mean, everybody loves the collective. It's probably the concept I hear the most talked about. So you guys are doing some great things. My last question is, if we fast forward, obviously co-working's been around for 10 years. Now we're getting into kind of the heat of co-living. Maybe we're 2 years in, 1 to 2 years. Where do you see us 10 years out?
It's a really good question. So, I mean, I see co-living being the mainstream, very much a mainstream housing choice for people in cities, because it caters to their needs. I think co-living providers naturally have a very innovative look on how we live, and I think take that same thinking to all other elements of the kind of development and kind of operational life cycles. So pioneering new technologies, whether that's how we run our buildings or how we construct. I think we'll see co-living really pushing the envelope or the co-living sector pushing the envelope on what's possible from the built environment. I also expect that we'll see a kind of a diversification, or maybe a diversification of the asset class into specific kind of groups of people. So maybe we'll see, co-living becoming more prominent amongst, I don't know, people of a certain age, for example, as an alternative to retirement living or student living. My mum, who's a single mum, I can absolutely imagine her benefiting from living in environments where, it's more of a community and there are more people looking out for one another. So, I expect that we'll see that taking place. And I think that will also, as I said earlier, spill out of urban environments into non-urban environments. So, towns and villages in rural areas where I think the need for community is increasingly more and more important as we see the decline in kind of churches and pubs, certainly in the UK anyway. There were fewer places of meeting. So I think the future is positive for co-living. I feel like it's a really a very exciting time, and the work of all people like yourself and all the other great providers out there are doing trailblazing stuff, and will, I think, really establish it as a sector that's here to stay.
I love that. And then about the technology piece, let's talk about that real quick. What technology do you guys use? Did you build your own? What are you guys using to facilitate everything?
Yeah, we've built our own. And the reason we did that was because at the time anyway, there was no off-the-shelf solution for what we needed. We've also kind of taken different kind of solutions and patched them together into, systems that do work, but we think there's huge opportunity in the technology space to enable a better living experience, both from a a resident's perspective, also through to an operator's perspective. How do we manage our buildings better, more effectively and efficiently, and free up our team's time to focus on our members and focus on what matters. And I think we'll see a lot of really exciting innovation in that space. I know you're leading the way in some regards.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time because all of it can be automated by technology. Yes, so it's exciting stuff. So perfect, Ed. Thank you so much again. This has been amazing, and have an awesome day and keep fighting the good fight of loneliness, breaking loneliness, and building incredible community around the world. We're excited. We're cheering you on.
Thanks very much, Christina. I really appreciate it.
Okay, have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for checking out today's episode. If you want to learn more about co-living, you could check out my book on Amazon, The Co-Living Code. And of course, if you're looking for the perfect software to power your co-living concept, check out Kndrd.io, Kndrd.io. Thanks. And a quick thank you to SPX Agency for all of the graphics, animation, and design on our YouTube channel.